Welcome to another episode of the Made to Be Great podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Today, I am going to talk about not only our general creation to be great in our own individual way, but also what's been on my heart and mind lately a lot is resilience. And that's resilience during and after things that are difficult that might derail us. So, just as a recap for anybody who might be a new or newer listener, is this podcast is called Made to Be Great because I believe that we are all made in God's image and created to do something great. And I also believe that each of our call is different and that each of us are called to do something slightly different that God has for us. And that my hope and prayer is that this podcast is a little part of helping call you into that, whatever that greatness is that God has for you. And something that I became aware of and observed in my career, kind of like midway through, especially when I started coaching with other people and being mentored by other people who were really successful in my space, which is mortgages, is that I had this propensity to kind of like emulate and copy someone who was really successful. So if they were successful doing X, whether it was seminars or whatever it was, I wanted to copy what they did. And I'm not saying that copying or emulating is wrong, but I think to a point, it's good to copy successful habits and methods that people have, but to adopt it in a way that's more unique to us and our personality and what really connects to us. And so that's a shift that I've made later in my career, is trying to figure out ways where things really resonate and connect with me, where I can take habits like, say, the habit of reading something positive every day, whether for you that's the Bible or some book on healthy eating or whatever it is that you're trying to grow and improve on, is there's a positive habit or a discipline of doing something each day to move you closer to that goal. But maybe for you, it looks a little different than how it looks for somebody else. So, anyways, that's kind of like a little recap about what the podcast is about, and a little bit about what I want to talk about in this episode is how we can continue to move forward when things are difficult. I don't know if anyone listening to this has had or currently has any difficult circumstances, but I suspect many of you can resonate with that. And so, something that I think is a big uh, help for us to break through to new growth levels is for us to have the capability of moving forward when things are difficult. Because if you only make progress or move forward or make effort on days where you feel great and you feel like you can easily do it without resistance, then the number of days where you can move forward is going to be very small. And so I think there's a key to being able to find ways to move forward when you don't feel like it, whether that's just sheer brute force sometimes of doing it or finding a way to shift your thinking into gratitude. For example, if you're running late, those of you who know me will be laughing when you hear this because I'm late a lot. You could be, so sometimes I'll have to say, like, man, if I'm running behind and then I get behind a slow car or traffic or there's an accident, I can shift that thinking to say something like in my head, hey, I'm really thankful that, I'm going to arrive in one piece and I wasn't in the accident that's slowing me down right now. And then pray for that person that they're okay. So just kind of finding little micro ways where you can shift your thinking away from something negative to thinking about the positive, or thinking, some of you may have heard more like glass half full. You'll always be in a better frame of mind if you're thinking glass half full versus glass half empty. And that's not to forget the fact that the glass might need refilling if it's starting to get towards empty, but usually there's always something that you can look at to shift your thinking into a more positive frame of mind. So, because those kind of frames of mind can really hurt us, they can hurt our progress, they can hurt our development. And something that I could use as an example or an analogy of that in my world, in the mortgage space, just as an example, is that years ago there was a really bad recession, and recessions are just a normal part of our economic reality. They go in cycles. Some are worse than others. They come and go. There was a recession called the Great Recession. I don't know exactly what the start and end dates are for it, but most of the people that I know in the mortgage and real estate space would say that that probably started very late 2007 and really didn't end until probably somewhere like in 2012. Housing, I think, was disproportionately impacted, although many other industries were impacted as well. And so that's real and true that there was very difficult times in that season. And people saw, for one of the first times in recorded modern history, actual home value declines, where a home was worth 250,000 and then was worth 100,000. That has rarely ever happened in modern recorded history, and that was emotionally and financially painful. And so anyone who experienced that or had a parent who experienced that, there's this trauma that's in your heart and your mind about that situation that happened, that was a real situation. Um, and so why I'm mentioning that in the frame of resilience is that you have to also take, when you have a traumatic event like that, it can be wise to try to zoom out and say, okay, what led up to that event? Kind of unpack the creation of it. How did it get there? And if you look at and study that, there was a lot of factors that went into what happened to create that Great Recession, and particularly why housing was so negatively impacted. And many of those things are not in, someone is trying to contact me about real estate right now. So, many of those things are not in existence today, really, probably none of them. So, for example, one of the big positive changes that happened was that um, you have to be able to qualify for the home that you buy now financially. So, like at the time people buy, this law passed in 2010. So, from 2010 forward, you have to, at the time you buy the home, prove with documentation that you can afford the home. That was a positive change that came from that. Also, a lot of the programs that helped people with lower credit scores buy homes with little or no down aren't around anymore. They were kind of regulated out of existence, which at the time was painful for demand, because demand went way down because a lot less people could qualify for those type of mortgages. But now we've had such a stable demand for such a long time, and everyone who owns a home today is a lot more financially stable. We've have had some of the highest average credit scores on record, again, in recorded history, people who have bought homes in the last 10 to 15 years. And so, you have an existing group of people who is a very, very strong financially group of owners. And then you have had for over a decade builders building less homes than normal and what the demand is. So you have the supply side creation much lower. You have a lot more stability with who owns property now. And so the conditions that were in play that caused the whole Great Recession housing bubble to happen are not in existence today. But the fear of what happened before happening again, it's emotional, it's not rational. And so, why I think resilience is so important, this is one example of, if you're in the fear and the emotion of what happened during that time, then you could think that it's totally logical and reasonable and rational and right not to buy a home because you think, well, hey, I lost my home in 2010, or my parents lost their home in 2011, or whatever the situation is. And so, therefore, I don't want that to happen to me. So I'm going to not play the game. I'm going to wait until there's another crash, and I'm going to scoop up property for 10 cents on the dollar, like they bought my parents' property or my old property. And so, if there was data to support the actual statistical likelihood that that would happen, that might be a good strategy. However, on the flip side, we actually have a lot of data that shows that that's highly, highly unlikely to happen. And so, therefore, you can only make a decision based on the information, the best information that you have available at that time, and then keep reevaluating and re-seeking and searching for the most current up-to-date information. And then sometimes you have to change your decision and make a different decision. Um, and a lot of people think like delaying a decision is delaying a decision. And actually, I don't believe that. I think delaying a decision or making no decision is a decision. You're still making a decision. You're making a decision to do nothing. And sometimes that's a great decision, but many times, particularly if you look at housing in the last 4 or 5 years, everybody who's been waiting is now in a worse position because I know several people who sold homes, what they thought was at the peak in 2020 and 2021, and they took that cash and they're sitting on it waiting for real estate to crash, and they're still waiting. Meanwhile, prices have gone up and up and up. Now interest rates are higher, and it's just the cost of owning has gone way up. So if inflation happens on home prices, and you own a home, then it's great. You love it because your net worth goes up, your equity goes up. It's a beautiful thing. Um, and so, but if you haven't bought yet, then it just gets harder and harder for you to get in the game. So I always tell people the best thing that you can do is put yourself in a position to own as soon as you can, but don't buy and make it uncomfortable to where, you're having a hard time financially. That's maybe a whole other episode. But in terms of making decisions and being resilient so that you can make great decisions, I think a lot of us are afraid of making a wrong decision or a bad decision. And I'm blanking out on who said this, but it was somebody really famous. Maybe we can add it to the show notes. We'll see. Um, but there was a famous person who said the most important thing is to make a decision and take action, the right action. The second most important thing or best move would be to make a wrong decision. And the third thing and the least desirable thing would be to make no decision and take no action. Because usually, if you take action, and even if you get negative feedback, meaning it didn't go well, you don't make the sale, you get rejected, you get feedback. And then with feedback, you can make a better decision. And so that's why I think that makes a lot of sense, where taking the best action, the right action, to where you get the win is obviously preferable. But a lot of times we don't have all the information we need to do that with certainty. And so the next best thing we can do is make a decision, get the feedback, revise, and then make another decision and continue to move forward without fear of that it has to work out or go perfectly every time. And so those are some of the things I think that when I see people that have a fear and let fear control them, which I've been guilty of this many times, even when you try to get data, sometimes the data changes. And, when you're in a habit, we're human beings, right? So we have emotions and we have habits. And so when you get information and it's right at the time, and then you get new information, it can be hard to change unless you develop that habit of being able to make adjustments when you get new information and be flexible with your methods. So a lot of times, it's smart to think about your goals, like, hey, I want to get from point A to point B. And So say in your career, it's, you want to make a certain amount of money. But, so that might be, you could accomplish that maybe in different ways. Maybe it's getting a promotion. Maybe it's being at a different company. Maybe it's completely changing industries altogether. There could be more than one way to achieve it. And so kind of opening up your mind to potentially different ways to get there, being flexible, taking feedback from real situations, and really evaluating that and seeing what's the best way that we can get there. So think about things that may be holding you back from being your greatest version of yourself. And really, maybe after this episode, take some time to make some notes and jot down and think, what are some things that are holding me back right now that served me at one time in the past, but aren't serving me anymore? And they're not maybe serving who I want to be a year from now or 2 years from now. What are some of those things? What are some of the things that you feel are, you know, maybe causing you to get in your head too much that you might need to develop a new habit for? Um, those are things that sometimes it doesn't come right to the surface. We're all busy, and um, maybe we don't set time aside to think through what some of those things are. But that can be a really, really valuable use of time thinking about, where was I? Who was I last year? Who was I this year? And who do I want to be next year? And what are the habits and thought patterns of those people? How quickly do they recover from adversity or a negative conversation or a negative day or week? And I've heard this several times from different places and authors, which is that a lot of us will say, "Oh, I'm having a bad day today or a hard day today." And I'm saying this to you as a listener, and I'm saying this to myself because there's been situations with me today and this week where I could say, or I would have said, man, it's been a really tough day or a really tough week. But in reality, if you zoom out, what happened is I had a really hard 5-minute conversation that I chose to hold on to and replay in my head over and over again, so that it lasted a lot longer than 5 minutes and it felt a lot heavier than really what it is and what it was meant to be. And a great way to shift forward and grow from that is to say, hey, you know what? Acknowledge this was a tough conversation. It didn't make me feel good. It actually made me feel really bad about myself. Was it true or was it not true? Because sometimes things that make us feel bad are hard and true. And we really need to like take a look at ourselves, and maybe we need to make some new habits or new agreements or new commitments or give up something that's getting in the way or causing this pattern. That's a real possibility. It's also a real possibility that the person who said those things themselves had had a bad conversation or a bad emotional thing before that, and they were just releasing that on you, and it has nothing to do with you. And so it does take some self-awareness to kind of be able to differentiate truly which one of those it is, because it could be either one or maybe sometimes a little of both. Um, but that's something, as I'm thinking, and as 2025 is close to wrapping up, which is crazy to think about. And I'm starting to work on reflections for 2025 and thinking about planning for 2026. That is something that really, when I look at my biggest opportunities for growth, are how quick can I shrink up the time from a tough interaction or conversation to really being into gratitude and calm and moving forward and making another action or activity to advance to where I want to be with my goals and who I want to be as a person. So, those are things that I think are universal to many of us. And the example that I shared uh, just a few minutes ago about housing is just a great example of what it can cost. So the thing is, a lot of times what's crazy is we don't take time to sit and reflect on what is the cost? What is the cost of me hanging on to this bad feeling? What is the cost of me hanging on to being angry about XYZ situation or being scared about what if housing loses its value? What is the cost of that? A lot of times we don't consider that. We only consider the cost of the worst case scenario, and we don't consider the cost of not taking action, um, which most of the time is significantly higher than the cost of the worst thing happening, because the worst thing rarely happens. Um, However, if you take more consistent action, the chances of something good happening from the sum of all those actions over a long period of time is pretty high. And it's crazy when you think about relative to the chances of something not working out or getting rejected every single time. Um, Statistically, data wise, taking some action, getting some feedback, and moving forward and trying to take the lesson and not take it personally has so much value. And when I think about the times in my life and my career that were some of the best times of growth, it was the times where I was in the headspace of being able to be grateful, to be humble, and to take a lot of action, and at the same time be able to make regular time to review that action and reflect on what the results were and think about what are some things I need to adjust, what are some things that I should keep doing, and what are some things that maybe I need to stop doing. And so I would encourage you, as you're listening to this and even after, to really think about what are some of those things for you, and what would it look like if you could wave a magic wand and be sitting here 1 year, 3 years, 5 years from now and have the perfect life? Another exercise that I'm going to share with you and encourage you to do is to have that thought and then take 15 or 20 minutes and write down on a notebook, write in detail what that looks like. Where are you sitting? What type of food are you eating? Who's around you? Where you live? What does your house look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? Um, be very descriptive. Talk about your relationships, your spiritual life, your relationship with God, if you believe in God, and just write it as if it's present tense, as if it already happened, and look at that note every so often and really lean into believing that maybe that's what God has for you, and that we're just why we're not there yet is we just didn't take enough action, consistently have enough belief that God would want that type of life for you, and then not to be discouraged. This is the other big thing as I wrap up this episode, is not to be discouraged if along the way you have meaningful and or sustained what feels like setbacks. Many times setbacks are actually things that produce character and muscle to be able to be resilient. Something that I've learned as I've grown in my life and my career and my relationships. And I'm not saying this like I have it all figured out, but I do feel like, having done a lot of work and gone through a lot of hard things, that I'm in a place today that I have a little bit more perspective. And all the times that I thought were really hard, that was like, here's evidence that I need to give up, it actually helped me to grow, be more resilient, be more prepared, and to be able to handle the responsibility and the stress and the pace of the things that come with that beautiful life that you just wrote down, because you think it's all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, and really, um, that is a part of it. But there's another part of it that's the preparation part, because if you're not prepared properly, then and you're able to say, get to those places and those goals, if you don't have the right character and the right work ethic and the right ability to be resilient, it could be gone just as fast as it came. And so sometimes the delays and the setbacks, those are things that are there really to prepare you and to help you to be able to have a longer duration on all those beautiful things that you just wrote down. So I hope this was encouraging to you. I thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Made to Be Great podcast. I know there's a lot of podcasts out there, so I always appreciate you taking the time to tune in. Until next time, I'll see you then.
You were made to be great. Don't settle for less. You were made to be